Apple says the iPhone 13 Pro Max has the best battery life ever on iPhone. But what about Android phones? Here I have some of the best ones out there: the Samsung Galaxy S21 Ultra, the OnePlus 9 Pro, and the Sony Xperia 1 Mark III. So let's jump right in. As always, I've made sure to match the exact same settings on all the devices with Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, and location enabled, and I've matched the brightness on all of them to keep it all fair. Let's kick things off with some Instagram. This is a very exciting battery test as it's the first time an iPhone can match the 120Hz of the Android competition. Plus, it also got a roughly 20% larger battery compared to its predecessor. At 4,352 mAh, it still has the smallest battery, but not by much, 4,500 on the OnePlus 9 Pro and the Sony, while the Samsung has a crazy 5,000 mAh large one. I'm very curious to see how the iPhone stacks up against its Android competition. Against its iPhone competition, it did extremely well, but this is completely different, and I don't really know how it's gonna turn out. An hour in, we already have a good indication of where we're heading. Both the Sony and the OnePlus are tied at 88%, followed by the Samsung with 91%, and the iPhone is at a crazy 98%, although iPhones tend to overreport the remaining battery life at very high percentages. So we'll have to see how it develops throughout this test. In terms of the displays, it's actually quite interesting. Like I said, they're all running at 120Hz, but they're dynamic, which means it switches the refresh rate based on whatever activity you're doing on your phone. Let's say you're just watching a YouTube video, it doesn't need to run at 120Hz, so it just goes down to 30 or 60, depending on what kind of video you watch. The only phone that can't do this is the Sony here. Some apps do force lower refresh rates, but generally it's not a dynamic display, which will probably drain the battery more. Now in terms of display sizes, the Sony actually has the smallest at 6.5 inches, 6.7 on the iPhone and the OnePlus, and 6.8 on the Samsung. The iPhone has the lowest resolution, but not by much. It's higher than 1080p, but not quite 1440p, which is what the Samsung and the OnePlus are running at. The Sony actually has a crazy 4K display, which is insane, but it does adjust it automatically in the settings, and it's not always running at the full 4K resolution. Most of the times it's just running at 1080p. After an hour of YouTube and some more gaming, you do see a clear trend developing with the Sony falling behind, probably due to that non-variable refresh rate. The OnePlus is not doing so great either, and the iPhone is incredible, still at 89%. But to be fair, the Samsung isn't too far behind. Moving on to some web browsing and then some more gaming. We're actually already 4 hours in, and the Sony is really struggling with only 53% remaining, while the 13 Pro Max is cruising with 79% remaining still. Very impressive stuff, and I feel like this is gonna be another long one. As we don't use our phones constantly non-stop, I thought it was again a good idea to do a standby test. They were resting for 11 hours, and the results are quite interesting. They all lost 4%, which is a decent result, except for the Sony, which lost a crazy 9%, and that really does not make sense to me at all. I don't know why it did so poorly. By the way, if you're enjoying this video so far, a thumbs up down below would be much appreciated. After another half an hour of Spotify, you do have a clear distinction between the Sony and the OnePlus now, with the Sony falling behind with only 35% remaining, less than half of what the iPhone still has. In terms of performance, Apple has always been crushing it. They claim the new A15 Bionic found on the iPhone 13 series is 50% faster than its leading competition, which would be the Snapdragon 888, which is found on the OnePlus 9 Pro and the Sony Xperia 1 Mark III. So I ran a few benchmarks starting with Geekbench 5. Now the Samsung actually also has the Snapdragon 888 chip, but I have the international model, which comes with the Exynos 2100. The results are very interesting, with the Androids all being basically tied, and the iPhone is ahead by a long shot. Not quite 50%, but it's still very significant. In the graphics test, it's even more pronounced, but I don't know how reliable this test is, as it's testing OpenCL versus Metal on the iPhone. The Wildlife 3D Mark benchmark, which I ran afterwards, is probably a better indication of how well they actually perform and compare, and here the iPhone dominates once again. But you do notice that the iPhone did decrease the screen brightness by a bit because it was an intensive task, obviously. In terms of battery life, we have a very similar story as before. The Sony is struggling a lot with 27% remaining, 39% on the OnePlus, 54% on the Samsung, which is actually doing fairly well, but the iPhone is still so much better with 68% remaining. Zoom is always very intense. We have a first low battery warning on the Sony now. We're gonna keep going with some TikTok and then some Twitch streaming. And after 6 hours and 14 minutes, the Sony was the first to go. Definitely not a terrible result, but not that good either. You have to keep in mind, this is a very expensive Sony flagship device, and battery life is around as good as on the iPhone 13 mini. Probably due to that crazy 4K display with the non-variable 120 Hz refresh rate. We hit the 7-hour mark after the Netflix round, and the OnePlus is gonna die soon as well. It's on single digits only. 31% on the Samsung, which is doing fine, but a crazy 52% on the 13 Pro Max. Again, this is gonna be a very long one for me. Now we're gonna move on to one of the most intense things you can do, 4K video recording. And this drains battery like crazy. And at 7 hours and 24 minutes, the OnePlus 9 Pro died. A good result, but nothing too impressive. We'll see how it fares later on in the charging test. Let's speed this up a bit because the iPhone still has a crazy 45% remaining, while the Samsung is already on its first battery warning. The Samsung did make it past 9 hours, but not by much. It died at 9 hours and 7 minutes, which is a good result, very respectable, and should last you the whole day if you're not a crazy power user, but it should be fine. It's around as good as the regular iPhone 13 Pro, which also has very good battery life. I cannot stress how good the battery life on the 13 Pro Max is though. I'm gonna speed up the rest again because it's gonna be a while. Past the 10-hour mark, past the 11-hour mark, past the 12-hour mark. And at 12 hours and 44 minutes, it finally died. Again, an insane result and very similar to the result I had in the iPhone battery test, which I recorded previously. Unbelievable battery life. If that's what matters to you the most, definitely go get the iPhone 13 Pro Max. But we're not done yet. Now that they all run out of battery, we're gonna do a charging test because that's the other side of the medallion. And you do have some crazy differences. You have 25 watt fast charging on the Samsung, 27 watt on the iPhone, 30 watts on the Sony, and a whopping 65 watts on the OnePlus 9 Pro. Keep in mind the OnePlus and the Sony are the only ones that do have a charging brick included in the box. And 15 minutes in, you do see a crazy difference already. Only 17% charge on the iPhone, while the OnePlus has 57% charged already. Half an hour in, things get even more crazy. 38% on the iPhone, 51 on the Sony, 55 on the Samsung, and 94 on the OnePlus, which only took around 38 minutes to fully charge. That is very, very impressive and kind of makes up for the not so impressive battery life. Because if you do run out of battery, you can just pop it in for a few minutes and after half an hour, it's basically fully charged. 1 hour in, the Samsung is pulling ahead at 93%, but the iPhone has caught up now at 76% charged. Samsung took around 1 hour and 14 minutes to fully charge, but the Sony and the iPhone especially are kind of slow, so let's speed this up. It took 1 hour and 49 minutes to fully charge the Sony, and a crazy 2 hours and 8 minutes to fully charge the iPhone using the Apple charging brick. That is really slow. What do you guys prefer? Having incredible battery life but only very slow charging like on the iPhone, or having incredibly fast charging but only decent battery life like on the OnePlus? If you're interested in the battery life of all the current iPhones and how they stack up, watch this one next. And make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell to not miss any of my upcoming videos. And I'll see you guys in the next one.